Yeah, of course I can. So let's go back to chatting. So the question is, can you explain what's the pro of using Redux over the native context hook? This is a very common question, actually. It's a weird question, right? You can see this question on YouTube. You can see this question all over the place. This question is comparing apples and oranges, right? These two things are vastly different concepts, right? Redux is a state machine. It's a full-fledged state machine where you decouple your state and your state transitions into a separate place. You decouple it from your components and your view library, right? So in theory, your Redux, you can replace your React with Vue.js, for example, and your Redux store is still valid. You would just reinstall a different library, so you wouldn't use React-Redux. You would use, I don't know, React-Vue, right? The library, the driver between Redux and the Vue library. So Redux is a state machine, and context API has been invented to prevent prop drilling, and that's the main reason why it was made, right? So context has very little to do with Redux. In fact, React-Redux npm package is, of course, using the context API to pass down the Redux store state, right? So for example, if you ever used Redux or Redux RTK, you will notice that there's this hook, custom React hook called useSelector, and that hook is using the context, so you can actually, under quotes, subscribe to the Redux store without passing the object through every single component, right? So these two things have very little to do with each other, right? Or in fact, even better said, they complement each other, right? And yeah, state machines are great, right? If you have an application that's relatively large, if you like to keep your state separated from your view, because in reality, right? Keep in mind that let me just switch to the drawing board, right? So if we go to the drawing board, right, your components always, no matter what you use, Svelte, React, Vue, Angular, jQuery, Knockout.js, Ember.js, whatever, your components should always be as pure as possible, because they're just pure functions, right? So your components ideally should get in some attributes, aka properties, and yield some HTML. Your components, whenever possible, should be, again, as pure as possible and deal with as least amount of things as possible, right? That means that you should not transform data in your components. That means that your component, so for example, let me give you an example. Let's imagine that you have a component that's called person. Or no, let's imagine you have a component that's called article, right? This article might have title, contents, created at, whatever. Let's keep it simple, right? Right. I know that every single one of you in this stream now have done this. Let me tell you what. You have this created at, right? And you're thinking, you know what? I'm going to get this, I don't know. I'm going to get this created at, which is some, local time format or whatever, any date format. And inside of my article component, what I'm going to do, I'm going to get like import some dates utils and then convert this date to whatever, right? I know that you've done this. You're probably doing it today, right? This is a very minimal example, but then extend your data and you're going to understand what I mean. And I don't do this, right? I like to do all of this stuff before the data enters my component. So I basically always do my best to give exactly what my component needs. That's why also, if you do this well, and you have a very good front-end facing API, you obviously have some Node.js or Go API in front of your front-end, right? You have an API that your front-end is talking to, right? Like this. And vice versa, right? Goes both ways. Request response, right? Let's just say rec res, right? You want this guy. Your goal always, absolutely always, should be that this guy does every possible transformation it can and deliver the data as dumb as possible to your UI. A lot of people in the front-end industry are talking about how front-end became hell, how front-end development became painful. And that is absolutely true. But it's not for the reasons that you think. It's for the reasons that a lot of things that we did in the backend 20 years ago, year by year, we moved it to the front-end. We can do it in the UI. Oh, we can do it in the UI. Oh, we can do it in the UI, right? Due to that mentality, your front-end application now does more work than your backend. It does everything, right? It does too much. So, what should be your goal if you're doing front-end development? You need to keep things super stupid and super simple. Pure components, give them as data as ready as it possibly can be. Use state machines when needed. So, for example, if you take a look at some of my Redux code, let's take a look at it together. If we take a look at my Redux store, let's look, for instance, at comments. You can see here that all of my complex state permutations are happening inside of my state machine. Like comment. If I go here and I write a comment, I cannot like my own, but if I did, that's not described in my component. My component doesn't care about the logic to like the comment. Why would it? It has nothing to do with that. My components need to show these three things, and it needs to show this number either incremented or decremented, right? But sometimes it's part of offloading some processing to clients to keep service costs low. Absolutely, but these are the things that no. In most cases, it has very little to do with that, right? Because your server is way faster of doing these transformations than your UI is anyway, right? So I don't think that has any honest, genuine reasoning in this discussion now, right? Your UI again should be always as dumb as it possibly can be, right? And these types of things that I'm showing you now as an example, they don't belong in your components, right? They belong somewhere else, either in your container component, either in your anywhere, but just not in your components, right? Your components, let me show you the comment system that I built for Programming Network, right? It's a great example of that, right? So if we go to the comment section system, look at this. This is my comment system, right? And if you have ever built a comment system, you'll know how painful it is because of recursion, because of various different types of things, right? Because in a comment, you have these threads, right? So I can reply this thread here. Let me show you. So you can have threads, you can have likes, dislikes inside of the threads, etc., many actions, right? But you'll notice one thing, for example, I even have a custom hook where I have abstracted out the Redux logic from my component, right? So if I go here, I have this use comment actions, and my comment section is not even tied, my Redux dispatching logic is not even part of my actual component. So I can test my component very easily because it's not even bound to any context of Redux itself, right? So if we take a look at this stuff, you will notice that there's absolutely no permutation of data in any way, right? It's just calling some functions, If we go to comment list, this is my comment list, as you can see. I'll just skim through it very quickly. So I'm saying here, hey, if you're editing a comment, show the comment editor, meaning, hey, if I click this edit, we'll show the comment editor there, blah, blah, blah. But you will notice again that there's absolutely zero data permutations in here anyway. No matter where I go, if I go to a single comment, you can see it's just view and it's super nicely organized. Components are broken into small manageable chunks, so you can see comment header, comment content, comment actions, minimal amount of props. How did I achieve minimal amount of props, you might wonder? Well, you can see that if you go a little bit up here in the tree, if we go to the comment section here, you will notice things like handle reaction, right? A lot of people are very often, so a lot of times when you're designing your props, your function arguments, we're all very prone to do things like handle like, handle dislike, handle X, handle Y. But you can often group that in a single handler function, as I did here. I have a handler reaction, and reaction can be of any of these reaction types, for example, right? It can be a like, dislike, create, edit, delete, reply. So I could have designed this in two ways, either as I did here, or passing 6 different props. Handle like, dislike, X, you saw it, Y, Z, right? So all of these things, when you account for them when designing your components, you can end up with, you can see here, now I have a single handler for these types of events, handler reaction. Well, we can't use a switch because there's some exceptions in here, but it doesn't matter. Like, let's in theory say you're right, we could use it, yes. If all of them are using React, yeah, we could in practice do that, yes. But you get the point, right? So you can see, so the original question was, what is the difference between Redux and context, right? And I went a little bit too far with it, but you get the point, right? Yeah, that's, I don't know, went a little bit too far, but that's my take on it.